Hello and welcome to another episode of Gear Toward Gear. My name is Sean and I'm so glad you're here. If you're a first-time viewer, please do consider subscribing for future content such as this, and check the description for links to my social media accounts where I'm pretty active. So today we're looking at a Kershaw, and if you watched my review on the copper Natrix, you'll know that that was the first Kershaw knife I had purchased in probably 4 years, and I just bought another one. So I bought two Kershaws in a matter of a month or so. I've had this one now for about a week, and a little over a week, and I threw it back in the box so you could see kind of how it comes. And I'm really excited about this one. I've got one gripe with it that's pretty common, and it is a USA made Kershaw, and you obviously know what it is because you can read the description. It is the Bareknuckle model 7777. So let's get into the box and see what we got going on here. So these have been super popular ever since they were released, and I think for good reason. Let me start by saying that this is basically a Kershaw Natrix. They call it the Bareknuckle. It's a cool name. It's got a great look to it. It's not an exact replica of a Natrix, but if we look at the copper Natrix that I reviewed previously, and also I have another Natrix that my dad gave me, which I probably won't do a video on, but I think I posted on Instagram. This is just a standard size Natrix. You're going to see some very eerily similar design elements here. The handle shape, the pocket clip cutout, the blade shape. I mean, to me, this is the USA Natrix, is what kind of how I see this knife. The design, I mean, it's uncanny how similar it is. If you look at the shape of the handle, the flipper tab, the cutouts for the pocket clip, the blade shape is truly the same. It just doesn't have this kind of groove in it that the Natrix line has. So this is very much a Natrix design. However, really it's based on the zero tolerance model 0777. And that kind of inspired the Natrix line, and then they introduced a USA made version, which instead of calling the Natrix, they called the Bareknuckle. So to me, it's the USA Natrix. That's what I call it when I'm, where no one else can hear me. But it is in fact the Kershaw Bareknuckle. So let's get these back on the table real quick, just for a size comparison. So the Bareknuckle is gonna have a blade length of 3.5 inches, where the standard Natrix is gonna have a blade length of 3.25 inches, so 1/4 inch less. And the mini Natrix, this one in copper, has a blade length of 2.75 inches. So that's kind of your progression. If I line up the butt ends of the knives, you've got your mini, your standard, and then your Bareknuckle is going to be a little larger. And they do now have a XL version of the Natrix, which I think has a 3.5 inch or 3.75 inch blade. So the XL Natrix is going to be closer to the size of the Bareknuckle. So let's get these Natrices. What's the plural form of Natrix? If you know, put it in the comments. I'm going to go with, I think the plural form of Natrix is Natrix. That's my guess. I'll look it up later. Or you can just leave it in the comments. So, Natrix, out of the way. Let's talk about the Kershaw Bareknuckle. So this has been supremely popular and hard to come by. A lot of dealers have been sold out. On Amazon, they've been hard to find. They go for about $70, and in most ways, it's very much the same as the Kershaw Natrix. So if you own a Natrix, nothing about this is really going to surprise you. The main difference is that it's got an aluminum handle scale, and that's about it. I mean, it's very much going to feel like a Natrix, but there's one potential issue which we'll talk about. So let's first talk price. As I mentioned, they go for about $70, $68, somewhere in there, whether it be on Amazon, Blade HQ, or your favorite online retailer, which I think is a fair price for a USA-made Kershaw. The overall length is 8.2 inches. The blade length, again, is 3.5 inches. It's made of 14C28N steel, which is a decent steel. I would say a good steel, not great, but good. It's got a drop point blade, which I think is bordering on kind of a sheep's foot almost, as I mentioned in the Kershaw Natrix copper video. The handle length is 4.7 inches. It is aluminum, as I mentioned, in a gray color. And there is some texture to this aluminum. It's not smooth or polished by any means. If I can get up close, maybe it'll see some of the texture there. So you can actually feel that texture, and it does provide some traction actually, which is nice for an aluminum handle. It's not super slick. The frame and the liner is going to be stainless steel. It's going to have that same subframe lock that you see on the Natrix. The weight on this is 3.5 ounces, so kind of getting towards my maximum in terms of weight. It's tip up, and that can be right or left. So tip up only, right or left carry, so very much a left-handed friendly knife. And actually, in some cases, I think this is better for a lefty than for a righty, and I'll touch on that as we get into it. It is a subframe lock, as I mentioned, just like the Natrix, and there's a built-in over-travel stop so that this subframe lock, when you disengage it, no matter how hard you push on this subframe lock, it's never going to go beyond flush with the handle scale, just like on the Natrix. Again, just like on the Natrix, you've got a generous cutout there and a nicely beveled liner there to get a purchase on to close the knife, which is super easy. It is not assisted, so one of my complaints with the Natrix series initially that I mentioned in a previous video is that most of the Natrix line is assisted, including the one that my dad gave me here. And I'm just not a huge fan of assisted knives, and so I'm glad that this is a manual opening knife. The detent is pretty strong, and it's actually a combination of a detent and a magnet. So there's actually a magnet in the kind of butt end of the knife, and as I close this, you may be able to hear it suck in. Let me try that one more time. I'll be quiet. You'll be able to hear it. So that's the magnet sucking that blade in. So the magnet is kind of your detent, and it keeps it in there nice and strong so that when you flip it open, it comes out super fast. Almost, it really does actually feel, and there's another video, I think it was it Budget Bug Out or some other channel did a video on this knife, and they mentioned that it feels assisted because that magnet kind of provides that really strong detent, and as soon as you overcome that, it just flies out. So I really like that about this knife. Again, USA made, model 7777. Now let's talk about the one thing that people have been griping about this knife, and I think it's a fair complaint. So the subframe lock is designed in such a way that if any pressure is put on it in this direction, it's very difficult to flip the knife. So if I hold it like this with my thumb, it's gonna be hard to kind of fully show you, but if I put my thumb right here and squeeze a knife, I am pushing, you can see my finger turning white. I'm pushing as hard as I can and the blade's going nowhere. And that's because I am pushing on the subframe lock. So with that said, in order to really deploy this knife properly, I found two ways to do it. And after a while, it becomes intuitive and it's not an issue for me. And I don't think it should be something that should dissuade you from buying one. But basically, I either hold it kind of up high, where my fingers are towards the top of the knife, and flip it that way. The other option is to hold it down a little lower, basically gripping it by the pocket clip and nothing else, and flipping it that way. And it comes out just fine every time with no issues whatsoever. And I've kind of gotten a rhythm down where it just flips very well. But you do have to be mindful about the placement of your fingers on the subframe lock side, because you can prevent yourself from deploying it if you have your fingers in the wrong spot. And that brings me to lefties. And I'm not a lefty, and this is gonna be a little awkward around the tripod, but for a lefty, when I put it in my left hand, my natural grip is this. I'm nowhere near the subframe lock, and it shoots out. And although the clip is not reversible, I'm sorry, the clip is reversible to the other side, so disengaging it may be a little awkward, but I've found that I can left-handed operate this knife very easily. I can disengage the lock, close it, flip it, disengage it, close it pretty easily with my left hand, and I'm very much not ambidextrous. So I think this is actually a pretty good left-handed option, despite it being designed for right-handed operators. So if you're lefty, I think this is a great option actually. So I'm digging the knife. The size and the ergonomics are good. That generous finger choil, just like on the Natrix line, and kind of just this smooth radius here allows for the rest of your fingers to just kind of fall into place. You do have some mild jimping up top. It's not aggressive at all. It's not super functional, to be honest with you. You can feel it when you hit it, but it's not gonna kind kind of make your thumb just stop in place. But I guess it's mildly functional. The aluminum is machined very nicely and contoured and beveled. It does have a plastic or some sort of FRN backspacer, so it's kind of a partial flow through on the front side, and then you got that backspacer running the length of it, just like on the copper Natrix that we've seen previously. Same thing, same backspacer. And I think it's the same backspacer on the Natrix as well, just the standard Natrix. Same thing. So that's your backspacer. The centering, as opposed to the centering on some other examples that I've seen in the Natrix line, the centering on this is dead center, perfect centering. The lockup is fantastic. It is, I mean, it's like Fort Knox. This is one of the strongest that I've felt in a while. So I'm digging it. The blade has kind of a stonewash finish. It says, it does say stonewash on the Blade HQ website. So if we get a close look at that, and I mentioned this in my Copper Natrix review, it's a very fine stonewash and it's done quite well. So overall, a very attractive knife, pretty user-friendly as long as you can get your kind of finger placement situated and figured out and just kind of get used to doing that. It flips phenomenally well. I like the size, fills out the hand, not too big. 3.5 inches for me in blade length is kind of my maximum. So I'm glad I checked it out. I will say that the the aluminum has almost like it's gray for sure. When you look at it, you think gray, but when you really look close and get it in just the right light, and this may not pick up on camera, it almost looks bluish or purplish almost, which I think is quite attractive. It's got all black hardware, black pivot. So yeah, that's the Kershaw Bareknuckle 14 C28N steel, made in the USA. You got your nice little American flag there, showing your model number and USA. So for a USA produced Kershaw with what appears to be very excellent quality control and good finishes on the blade as well as the handle, for $70, I think the price is spot on. I probably wouldn't pay $90 for it, but I think $70 is fair. $60 would be better, but $70 is certainly a fair price for what you're getting for this knife. So I'm certainly happy that I've checked it out, and I think if you're in the market for a kind of medium to large size folder, I think the Kershaw Bareknuckle could be a great option for you. And just for one last comparison, I'll bring in the other standard size Natrix and the mini Natrix. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll talk to you very soon.